Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along. We might just give it another minute or so while everyone's coming into the webinar before we get going. Okay, so thanks for coming along to our webinar today, Research During Your Medical Degree. I'll be your host today. My name is Katie Smith, and I'm the Ochsner Partnership Advisor here within the Faculty of Medicine. Throughout our session today, we'll hear from our panelists, Professor Di Eley and UQ student Roshan Lala. Following their presentations, we'll open up to a Q&A session. However, if you do have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to type them into the chat. When we open up to a Q&A, if you want to turn your microphone or camera on to ask a question, you can also feel free to do so. My colleague Irene here within the faculty will also be moderating the chat throughout the session if anyone has any questions. So with that brief introduction, I'd just like to pass over to Professor Eley.
Thank you, Katie, and hello to everyone out there. We can't see any of you, but welcome. And we are going to tell you a little bit about the UQ medical program today. I'm going to specifically talk about research in your medical degree. So I'll share my screen now. Right. Is that, oops, going too much. Is that looking okay? Or is this better?
Good.
Is that good? Like it is. Yep. Okay. All right. So I'm Di Eley. And I'm director of MD student research in the medical program. My background, I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about my background. So my background is actually in basic science. I was in physiology, working with domestic animals, the big ones. And then I changed to the dark side of social science for my PhD. So I did a master's in physiology, and most of my work was as a bench, as a lab scientist. And then I decided to do a PhD in something completely different. And so that's how I've ended up in a medical school, I guess, education and biomedical sciences, who knows. I'm now sort of in charge of the student, what medical students can do, their opportunities in research alongside the MD program. So I think you've probably done a bit of homework on UQ by now, if you're at this webinar, and you'll know that the University of Queensland is very highly ranked and research intense university. So if you are interested in research, this is a very good place to get some very quality and exciting research opportunities. And our other panelists today, Roshan, will be telling you about his experiences as an MD PhD. So yes, we have a lot of students, we have a lot of researchers. We're very successful in research income, which means that there's a lot of capacity here. So depending on what you want to do or what your background is, you can probably do something that you'll find, worthwhile. So all the research that goes on in a medical school, I think anywhere, is really about linking, preclinical and clinical science discovery and then translating it. So you start with basic scientific discovery and you translate that into clinical research. And then that goes further into providing evidence, which you can then produce outcomes in healthcare for the greater population. So that's kind of the translation pipeline. And we have three main programs that facilitate this in biomedical sciences, medicine itself, and then in public health. So it's very comprehensive. We got a lot of research strengths. And we have 5 hospital-based research centers, and this is all within the Faculty of Medicine, 3 research-intensive schools, and then, as I said, clinical research across all the hospitals. And there are many hospitals in the University of Queensland's patch, so to speak. So this, if you can appreciate, you can't really appreciate it from this photo, but this is one of our research institutes called the Translational Research Institute, a magnificent building. You can probably see it from the moon. It's really big and quite impressive, and it houses several of our research centers. So here are the 5 main centers in the faculty there. You'll spend a lot of time in the TRI as a first and second year. And then we have 5 schools, as I said, biomedical sciences and public health teach into the program. And then we have the School of Clinical Medicine, which is based in Brisbane. And then we have a rural clinical school, which has 4 different regional centers. So if you want to, if you're interested in rural health or doing rural research, there's 4 different regional areas that you can get involved in. And then, of course, we have the Ochsner Clinical School in New Orleans in the US. So just a quick word about the research in the new MD curriculum in 2023. So some of you may be heading for us in 2023, and we hope to see you there. But I'd like to just highlight how what's new about the curriculum. And it is quite exciting because the overall, I think, theme for me is integration. For example, for research, from week 1, research will be introduced and will, integrated throughout your program, and it'll be explained how that's going to happen. And you'll also have many opportunities to do hands-on research, and some of those, we can talk about today. And the overarching principle of this is that, is to apply that clinical and scientific evidence to your clinical practice. So they always say, if you haven't heard it, you'll probably hear it soon, is understanding research and having research skills will make you a better doctor. And that is true. I don't know if it'll make you a better doctor, but there are certainly skills that you learn through research and the research process that you won't get unless you do research. There's various ways to get that experience. So just as a little heads up that about the new curriculum and sort of watch this space, I suppose, but it should be pretty satisfying for people who are interested in doing some research in their medical degree. So what are your research opportunities? Well, as I said, a long tradition of academic excellence and scientific discovery. So, that means, you're doing research, but you're also publishing and, disseminating your work. And so we encourage students to participate in research in some way, and these are the main options. So the clinician scientist track is the MD PhD program or an MD master's. You can do either one. It's different degrees, but you can combine either one with your medical degree. You have to be eligible to get into a PhD and a master's, but that's something that we can talk about and discuss if you feel you want to do that. And then there's extracurricular research, and this is pretty popular. Popular is not the right word, but a lot of students do this because it's flexible, and it's actually considered work experience. So it's casual volunteer, but it's quite, we have a process that you go through to be able to work with somebody, and you choose a project and work with your supervisor to do something. It's casual, and it's also flexible. So it's good if you don't have a lot of experience to try this as work experience. And also, if you don't have a lot of research experience already, coursework options are good. And so in the new curriculum, there will be opportunities for this. Right now, there's research coursework in the form of electives, and that will be also prominent in the new curriculum. So I want to say now that if you're interested in research, and if you want to do some homework before you come, or if you're still thinking about coming, look at the student research portal. I mean, you can Google student research portal and it'll come up, but this link will take you to it. And I think these slides will be available to everybody afterwards. So you'll have that to keep and maybe bookmark It is really the place to go for information about student research at UQ, for medical students, that is. So it does what it says here. It connects students with supervisors in their research. And I want to focus, that this is not coursework. This is extracurricular and other things that are not actually in the medical program, but they're opportunities for you to take advantage of. So here's the homepage again, and I'd like to highlight the clinician scientist track, which I just mentioned. So that's the MD PhD. If you're interested in that, definitely have a look there. And for Ochsner students, we have an Ochsner Student Research Hub. So this is for you in phase 1 and phase 2, which is first 2 years in Brisbane, and then your 3rd and 4th years back in New Orleans. So there's some information on you on that, for you on that. And here's a hub here if you're interested in rural research. So this is the sort of thing this is the sort of information you can get. And on these pages, they'll tell you how it works, who to contact, and things like that. Definitely have a browse through this, I would suggest. And this is the other, the bottom part of that homepage, which is just, again, have a browse. These are just tiles which include, what it says here, student research achievements. We encourage you to let us know when you get a publication or you're working with somebody on research, and we're proud of that. When we publish that, so keep in contact. That way, we have a student conference every year, so there's information about that. And then research events, scholarship opportunities are put up here. And I would encourage you to also click on this. This is a list. This page goes to a list of all our clinician scientists students. And there's we've had about 125 over the last 10 years. So it shows a lot of interest and also success on behalf of the students. This link here gives you, or this page here gives you direct links to all the research centers at UQ. So this is a pretty good way if you really want to browse and not sure what's happening where, try that. And then there's a couple other links. Just have a good browse. I should mention also that there is a Master's of Public Health, an MD MPH, that's possible. That's run by the School of Public Health. So we don't. So this is the information. You go to here, and it'll tell you who to discuss that possibility with. And then we really try, COVID allowing, obviously the last few years things have been on Zoom, but we try to have a lot of events and face-to-face events when possible. And we have some very high quality symposia that from the Australian Academy of Health and Medical Sciences. As a student, if you're interested in research, you can get involved in these. You can get involved in being a student convener in some of these, which is really good experience. You meet a lot of your heroes if you're a research geek, and a good way for future collaboration and just good experience. Ochsner has an annual research day, so that's a very prestigious one-day event, usually one-day event in May. So students there's a part for students on that as well. And then, as I said briefly, that we have an annual medical student research conference every year. And so hopefully you'll get involved in that. And I think that's me done. My contact details are here, so you can get them from here, or I'm sure that they'll be sent to you. So thank you very much.
That was a great overview. So now that we've heard a little bit more about how to get involved in research here at UQ, I'll pass it on over to our next panelist, Raushan Lala, who's a second-year MD PhD student who will talk a little bit more about the student experience.
Cool. Thanks, Katie. Hi everyone. My name's Raushan. As said, I'm one of the MD PhD students here at EQ. So I've sort of been given a couple of questions just to, I guess, share some experiences with the program so far. So just a little bit about me. I'm a domestic student in the MD program. So I was grew up in Brisbane, went to high school in Brisbane, did my undergraduate degree at UQ in biomedical sciences, and I finished that in 2019. And then I did the graduate entry pathway into the MD program. And so I did first and second year of the medicine program, and then commenced the PhD after that. So I'm currently in my second year of full-time PhD work, and that will continue for next year as well. So we'll have 3 years of full-time research, and then go back and do third and fourth year medicine. So the whole program will be sort of 2 years, phase one or MD 1 and 2, then 3 years of the PhD, and then phase 2, which is MD years 3 and 4. So my sort of interest in research started during my undergrad. During undergrad, there was an opportunity to take part in a summer research program. And so I did that in molecular biosciences at one of the institutes at UQ, it was fantastic, but it's unrelated to what I'm doing now. We were trying to define some of the mechanisms of protease activation during sepsis. And my role as a sort of summer intern was to assist the PhD student on the project with some of the lab work, some of the write-up. So it was a really sort of immersive but brief exposure to laboratory research. And yeah, that sort of sparked a bit of an interest, I guess, in the research process of sort of defining a problem, developing an approach to solve it, conducting the experiments, and then sort of, I guess, interpreting the results in a relevant way. So yeah, as I said, that project didn't really relate to what I'm doing now, but it was a great opportunity to get some exposure to research. So then my PhD, which is what I'm working on now, examines some physiologic parameters during trauma and hemorrhagic shock, and then subsequent resuscitation. And so what we're interested in are specifically the microcirculatory responses to injury, shock, and subsequent resus. And so just to give you a little bit of, I guess, background on that. So the microcirculation is the capillary division of the circulatory system. And that's the site where tissue perfusion and oxygen exchange is occurring. And really when resuscitating trauma patients, one of the primary goals is to restore tissue perfusion. But to, I guess, measure or monitor the patient progress after resuscitation, we use clinical parameters that are derived from more macro hemodynamic markers. And there's some good evidence to suggest that in critical illness, the markers that the sort of clinical parameters like mean arterial pressure or cardiac output behave discordantly to the microcirculation. And that's a problem because the microcirculation is where the tissue perfusion is occurring. So we're trying to characterize microcirculatory function after injury, and then in response to various resuscitation maneuvers. So in terms of one of the questions that I got was, why did I select this area? And it's a good question. I think really getting into the MD PhD was more of an opportunistic thing. So I sort of, after the initial undergrad exposure to research, I knew that I wanted to do research during the MD program. But I wasn't really sure at that point how it would look. Once I started medicine, though, I sort of quite quickly developed a pretty strong interest in anatomy and some of the surgical sciences. And my current supervisor for my PhD is the professor of clinical anatomy at UQ, and then he's also a surgeon scientist. And so I guess as he was delivering the content and sort of delivering the pracs, it was pretty clear that he was someone that I'd be able to learn a lot from, and he is someone that I'm still learning a lot from. And so when I got to talking to him about the sort of his research work and the projects that he was running, it was pretty clear that this work would be a great opportunity for me to sort of meet other collaborators and work with people that have been down the path that I want to go down. and sort of I didn't really have any specific background in the subject matter of the project, but it was interesting, and so I signed up for it, and I haven't really looked back. It's been fantastic. I have sort of now been exposed to disciplines of medicine that I didn't really appreciate existed, and yeah, it's been a fantastic experience so far. So that's sort of why, I guess, how I got to where I'm at the moment. And then, as Professor Eley said during her presentation, I think that the sort of having graduates that can bridge the gap between clinician and scientist is really important. I think that when we look at the basic sciences and then the clinical sciences, there's a lot of really high quality research that's lost in the sort of translation step. And that might be due to sort of a lack of understanding maybe between, I guess, the priorities of a scientist versus the priorities of a clinician. And I think the clinician scientist should really exist at the interface of those two, I guess, skill sets. And what that means is that we should have an ability to sort of translate high quality research that's been undertaken in a very rigorous manner, and be able to apply that clinically. I think also that, as was said, the skills that I'm sort of learning during the PhD program hopefully will make me a better clinician. I think the sort of approaches to problem solving that you develop through research is definitely will be related to clinical problem solving and sort of being able to, I guess, frame problems from multiple viewpoints and evaluate the solutions that you're developing. And then also sort of the importance of evidence-based practice. To do that well, I think you need to be able to look at an entire body of literature or evidence and be able to synthesize that to draw a clinically relevant conclusion that's relevant to your patients. And obviously research training really teaches you how to do that, more so than perhaps just sort of reading papers in isolation. One thing that I've seen, I guess, during the PhD program and sort of my undergraduate research at UQ is the sort of breadth, I guess, of subject matters and researchers and professional backgrounds that sort of occurring at UQ. Even within the MD PhD program, there's a great breadth of research disciplines and projects that are going on at the moment. So as you saw in the slides, we have an MD research conference every year, and that's really a great showcase of sort of the diversity of projects that are occurring. So mine's a preclinical translational animal model study, but there are students that are doing genomics studies. There's sort of quality improvement and patient safety studies going on. So, you know, there's if you want to be fully immersed in lab work, then that's available. But there are other people that are doing stuff with very little or no wet lab work. So there's a great breadth of I guess types of research that's going on here. I guess one other comment on the sort of breadth of research is also the breadth of interprofessionalism and collaborations that you can get at UQ. So it just in my case, our animal model for the trauma study, it's a large preclinical animal model. So we run these studies at the vet school in collaboration with veterinary surgeons and anaesthetists, in addition to the human medicine and surgery colleagues. So I have on my supervision team some veterinary clinicians, and so we get a very sort of wide range of, I guess, professional disciplines that work together, and I think that really improves the quality of not only the actual project, but the experience. For the experience for me has been, I think, improved by having a much broader range of professions involved. So then, I guess, sort of as I'm about halfway through the program at the moment, and so need to, I guess, start giving some thought to how I think the research degree will sort of be involved in my career. And I think I'm sort of still working this out, but I envisage a career where my primary function will be clinical, and then I'll be able to sort of produce high quality research that will relate to what I'm doing clinically. I have really enjoyed the preclinical work, and I think that's it's been a really valuable part of the program. But I think for the MD PhD graduates, the magic really happens at the sort of the interface between preclinical and clinical. And so that translational phase is really important. And some of the clinician researchers that I've been exposed to and that I work with are really highly skilled in translating good quality research into improved patient outcomes or management. And that's really what I want this program to do for me in my career. And I don't really, I don't have any doubts that it won't. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it'll look, but that's sort of what I want to get out of it. And then finally, just a couple of, I guess, bits of advice. So I think one thing is the medical school is really big. There's lots of people, but there are lots of people in the medical school, clinicians, academics, other students that are really happy to help you. And so I think you shouldn't hesitate to approach people that are doing things that you might want to be involved in. I mean, my whole project really just started from a fairly informal conversation in one of the anatomy labs, and then kind of just flourished from there. I also think you don't have to have decided on a specialty or what you want to do afterwards to get involved in research at this stage. I mean, I haven't, and even if I end up doing clinical work that is not directly related to what I've done during my PhD, I think the skills are highly translatable and will still be very valuable. And then, yeah, as you saw in the slides from Professor Eley, there are lots of opportunities to get involved in research at med school in an informal and less, I guess, committed capacity before you commit to an MPhil or a PhD. You just sort of have to seek them out and speak to the people that are offering them. But I think overall it's a fantastic program. I've had a great experience so far, and I've really got a lot of great benefit out of it. Thanks.
It was really great to hear what brought you into the MD, PhD, and also kind of a little bit more about what your current thinking is about where you're hoping to go in the future. So I'm hoping that some of the attendees really appreciated that insight. So with that, we'd actually like to open it up to the Q&A portion of the session. We might have a few questions. I saw a couple hands coming up and down, but feel free to pop your questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand on the chat function, we can turn your mic on and you can ask a question that way. So while we wait, in case there's any questions through, oh, here we go, we got one. Eric, I'm going to turn your mic on. There you go.
Hello, testing, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right on. Just to let you know, the chat is disabled for me, so I can't type anything, but I'm talking now. So my question is, can you do for the clinician scientist track, or I guess in general, can you do research in economics with your MD? That's my question.
Thanks, Eric. That's a good question. And I mean, I have to say off the bat, yes, of course. And we would hope that it would be somehow related to medicine. There's a lot of, I'd be very interested to know on your slant on this, but of course, you know, are you running a hospital? Is it related to healthcare?
Yeah, so it would be specifically looking at how income levels correlate with health outcomes, and going further, perhaps even geographic region and so on. So really expanding upon economic determinants of health. So, socials broadly speaking, but specifically financial aspects of one's life and how that may help determine things. I have a lot of ideas on this, but that's kind of in broad strokes.
That's really excellent. I would very much welcome that sort of project. As Rashawn had said, you don't have to get involved in wet lab research. And I think I think that a lot of students think that anything to do with research is in a lab. And if you come to medicine, that clinical research is generally, there's some way to get that in. And anything that is related to medicine and healthcare, especially now going forward, with all the things that we're dealing with, pandemics, climate, this sort of research is just so valuable, and we'd love to get more students involved in it, because research can be on anything, as you know. So that's a great. I already like your initial idea. And the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay, excellent. No, thanks so much. I did notice there was that behavioral economics research group in the Department of Economics with some folks from the Faculty of Health and Medicine, and I was just wanting to confirm that it's not just a pipe dream, it's a pipe reality. So, okay, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I think we fixed the issue with the chat box, so everyone should be able to type in there now, but we do have a couple other raised hands. So Kyung Wook, I'm going to unmute you for now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you for a very informative workshop. It was very helpful. I have a question about tuition fees on MD PhD program, because it's a 7-year program, and as an international student applicant, financial mean is not something that can be just ignored. So I was just wondering how the tuition and the funding would work for the MD PhD students.
So Katie or Irene, do you have any information on that? Because I don't have that information.
That is a good question. Irene and I actually don't have information on that, but we can provide that information when we send out the recording link.
For sure. Thank you very much.
In general, that you should probably go to the admissions pages on the website, the medical program website, and there'll be probably all that information will be there. I'm sorry we can't, discuss it with you, but that's where it will definitely be there, and there should be contacts, or perhaps Katie can give you a contact from someone in admissions. The whole process is there. Just not sure about fees myself, and I wouldn't want to say.
Got it. I'll double check the website. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We have a couple other questions coming through in the chat, but I have Adi has raised their hand. So Adi, I'll unmute you here.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Oh, Adi, we might not be able to hear you anymore. Are you still there? Might be having a couple technical difficulties there. We do have another question from Robert. Robert, did you have a question there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I've done quite a fair bit of research on MD PhD programs, not only here in Australia. Oh, I think Adi might have come back into the chat, but yes, I've done a bit of research of MD PhD programs around the world, including here in Australia, and I'm quite aware that the MD PhD program is quite new here, and I think as it has suffered all around the world, there is typically sometimes a lack of support for students. So I just wanted to know, because I know in and throughout Australia, UQ is the best place to pursue this MD, PhD track and the clinician scientist track. But what processes do you guys have in place in terms of supporting students, not only during the program, but afterwards as well? Because I know that the residency programs might not always be very welcoming of students wanting to continue their research after they finish their degrees, at least here in Australia. But I know it is a tide that is changing as time goes on.
Thanks, Robert. That's a good question. And I think I'd have to agree, not just because I'm biased, but, you know, UQ is really the only university or medical school in Australia that has such a developed program and a long, for so long. But you're right, we do it very differently than other places. And if you're familiar with North America in the MSTP program, I'd love to have that here. Love to have it's very well supported. You matriculate as an MD PhD, so your tuition fees and things like that would be combined, I presume. Whereas here you come in as an MD student, and then you add on the PhD. So it works. It's not probably I don't think it's as good, but it does give students that little bit of cushion time to think about what they want to do. Your question about support, well, that again is almost two pronged. So you're paying for, as an international, you're paying for your MD tuition. And then when you get in, if you decide to do a PhD, and if you're eligible to get in and you apply, that is one of the things that I will do, will work with you on. And, if you look at the clinician scientist track page, it's got steps to apply, and just read all that information and you'll see why I want to know who you are, what you want to do, and what your plans are early, because we want to make your CV very competitive, because you will be competing for a PhD scholarship in order to do this, and you will need to get the scholarship. So that will pay, the PhD scholarship will pay for your 3.5 to 4 years of living stipend, and then your full PhD tuition. So it's pretty good. It's in, again, it's in two parts, but it's separate from the MD, but it is, you're supported for that. And you do need to progress along the timelines, but it's designed to allow you to do that. And your question about what do you do with it afterwards, and how do you deal with residencies that aren't very keen on you doing research? Well, I think that's really something that we all need to change, because hospitals love to have clinician scientists. They want to have them, and then we give them students that are ready to combine their clinical work with research, and all they can see is you as a clinician, and you've got they tend to lose sight of that. That's a problem in Australia. I don't know if it's as much a problem in US, although I do recognize what you're saying. And if you're going to be trying to match back in North America, I think you would probably be seeking out the bigger academic health centers that really welcome or even have programs for like a fellowship for entering residents. I know they exist. It depends on where and what the specialty is. But I've we have lots of students have done that and gone back, and they kind of get their eye out on the places that will appreciate somebody with a PhD. And this is complicated because what's your career choice, what's your specialty choice, and then how's your PhD going to fit in with that, as well as where you're going to be doing your residency. So there's a lot of homework to be done, and in North America that is an issue for you. Here in Australia, not so much, because you go straight into an intern role. However, you don't have much time for research. So that is a problem that we are trying to start to address now. And I can say that we do have a couple programs that are pilots that are allowing, which will allow some protected time for early postgraduate medical students or graduates to have some time to do some research.
Awesome.
Rashawn, would you like to comment on that as somebody who's going to be coming into that system?
Yeah. I think first of all, in terms of the support that you get, you sort of have to navigate the graduate school and the medical school, and the MD research website is really useful, as is Professor Eley, in sort of navigating the requirements for both. So I think in terms of the mechanics of getting it done, it's quite doable. Yeah, I am aware that in the early postgraduate years, it's quite there. As it stands, I don't think there's protected research time. But my understanding is that, yeah, in Australia anyway, there are sort of pathways that are starting to be developed to address the problem of people doing PhDs during medicine, and then I guess just hanging the diploma on the wall and not using them afterwards. But yeah, it's something that I think does require a bit of homework in terms of where you end up doing your intern and early postgraduate years, to make sure that you sort of still get that exposure to research. But hopefully, like I'm 3 years from graduating, there will be, I think the later postgraduate years, you've got more flexibility. And I guess in the postgraduate training sort of timeline is, I think, slightly different in Australia than it is to the US. But in the later years of residency, or specialty training, there's a bit more time. But yeah, certainly those early postgraduate years, it might be a little more difficult.
Thank you for your answers. Yeah, I think anyone coming into the MD PhD program, if they qualify here at UQ, would, I think most people have done their homework and are aware that they'll be adding to building the name and, possibly helping to change the tide here in Australia, so that there is more, formal structures in place to, have protected research time and more support for MD PhD students, because I think it's something that's needed all around the world. Yeah,
you definitely, that's so true. And it's surprising with the amount of literature out there that say there's a lack of clinician scientists. And the pandemic was a good example of, are we really prepared for these? Who's out there? Because as Rashawn said, with that clinical background, and as you would already know as well, but the clinical background and being able to translate, that's how you translate it. You fill that gap between, the bench and the bedside, as they say. And so, we know that, and yet we don't sort of, finish the path. So it's frustrating.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll get there.
Slowly.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Thanks for that. Di, we had another question. Someone asked if you're aware of any projects where students have gotten involved with AI collaborative projects.
Probably. I'm not really artificial intelligence projects. Yes, is that, I'm not up on my acronyms, but look, as I think Rashawn also said, there's just everything here. And, the funny thing is, and this is why I really encourage you to take time and search around. But, people will say, I want to do work in AI. And where they found it? They found it in economics, or they found it in a non-medical discipline. And this is why I say, any PhD is fair game. We don't restrict that you have to be in a clinical or a medical discipline, because research it's universal. I mean, it's just a process to answer questions. And AI, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, talking that spark, we have a huge and a very, very well-developed digital health. And I know that sounds pretty lame, but it's all about AI. you know, electronic records is a good example of, you know, of what's done there. But I could tell you the person to contact today, that you could probably have that answered for you. But you know, again, the answer is yes.
Thank you for that. We've had a couple questions about is research experience required prior to coming along to the MD PhD program? Is it competitive? And specifically as an international student, do international students have any flexibility during breaks to say travel home, or is it essentially a full-on research project that they'll be working on?
Well, first of all, what was the first one? Oh, yeah.
Competitiveness, do you need experience?
So, you know, what I went over was pretty basic, but our conversation so far has been focused on an MD PhD. Now, a PhD or a master's, it's a higher degree by research. So that's another level. You do have to be eligible to get into the PhD. And if you look at my page, it's got links to the graduate school that say, what is a PhD? What is a master's? And you should look at that because of what's expected. You would need to have pretty sufficient research experience to get into a PhD, not so much for an MPhil. And that's where, you know, if you're really keen and you're really committed, I shouldn't say keen and commitment's very different. But if you really want to pursue doing research, you could start as an MPhil. There's that possibility too. And if that's all you do, then that's fine. But you can also then step up to a PhD. But yes, for a higher degree by research, there are requirements above what, you know, you needed to get into the MD, for example. And they're all research requirements. So you need to be research ready or so to speak, to get into that. What was the second question? Let me just say also though, that, you know, there are ways to get that experience. Now, if you come into the MD with no research experience at all, that's absolutely fine. And, you know, really the majority of our students don't have much research experience because they're doing medicine. And if they just haven't had the opportunity or actually thought it was relevant. So we want to turn that around, that attitude around in your first year. And that's why we give you some other opportunities where you don't need to have a lot of research. That's where you get some, you know, basic, you know, understanding and hopefully, you know, get a little bit of a hook on, you know, your interest in research and help build that throughout your 4 years. So don't feel you have to do a PhD. A PhD is, I think Rashawn would tell you, very different mindset, you know, and very different level of commitment and look and experience. So, you know, that really make that clear. The other thing that you can do is some coursework, like electives in research, where you have a bit of protected time to do a little project. Again, good for anyone, but especially good for beginners or novice researchers. Yeah. There was one about, what was another one, Katie?
Yep, it was about international students. So if they're doing the MD PhD, do they still have the opportunity to say travel home in between breaks?
Yeah, again, a bit complicated. The way I can say it best is when you're on your PhD, full-time PhD block, which is 3 years after year 2. And before you go back to the MD in year 3, you've got 3 years full-time. That runs as a PhD. And a PhD here at UQ is not like a PhD in the US or North America. It is a research PhD where you don't have required teaching responsibilities. You don't have required coursework. You can do all these things if they contribute to your research, but they're not required. You're really focused on a project that is primarily self-directed. So you will work with a supervisory team, and they're very important. I say right now, even if you're looking into do casual research, really think seriously about who you're going to do this with. One, you have to get on with them. And they need to like you, and you need to like them, and you need to get you need to be have a common cause, because research takes a long time. It's not a course. It doesn't end and finish generally at the same time. It will somewhat, but generally you get the research done and the papers come afterwards, or the analysis comes afterwards. So it's not like taking courses. That's why it's good to get some experience first in how it works. I did my first degree in the United States, where I had coursework with my master's. I did my PhD in the UK at Bristol. And wow, that was really different, because it was just like, here you go. This is what you want to do. Go off and do it. And our PhD is somewhat like that, but you have a very close supervisory team. And as Rashawn said, interdisciplinary, many different, levels of advisors that are just gives you a really rich experience. So it's different in that way. To answer your question, taking time off, also quite flexible in a PhD. You have time, again, you can look at what's on the website. You won't be able to take it all in, but it is somewhat flexible. And we have a lot of international students which will go overseas in their break time. But there's nothing, you don't get a break at this point or that point. I mean, across 2 or 3 PhDs, they'll all be running different schedules. It just whatever the research requires. I hope that sort of answers your question. Rashawn, maybe you wanted to add something there too, because you're living it.
Not too much to add, but I would definitely echo the importance of the supervisors that you choose. I think they need to be accessible, and if they're clinicians or clinician researchers, they're obviously going to be quite busy. But I think the good supervisors, sort of recognize that they have a critical role in your sort of development as a researcher. And my supervision team has been fantastic. They're highly accessible, but they sort of aren't, I guess, micromanaging me either. So as was said, it is quite independent, but you need to have regular sort of consults with your supervisors, because it's a lot of work to get done in a short period of time, and you kind of want to be using the time that you've got as efficiently as possible. So that would be the note on the supervision team. I think in terms of flexibility, I mean, my work, like the actual experiments that we do require me obviously to be there in person. But beyond that, most of the work, like the data analysis, all of the sort of the obviously thesis writing and the write-up can be done obviously from a laptop. And my supervisors aren't sort of too concerned with me being in the office every day. So I think that there is some flexibility there, but obviously, again, there's a lot of work to be done, and you can't really fall behind. So you need to be able to manage that from wherever you do it. And then, I guess the other thing in terms of, you need to really consider what you want to get out of the program. Like if your primary end goal is author on a couple of publications, then a PhD is a big commitment for that. Whereas if you're more interested in, I think the PhD really teaches you the process of research. And as Professor Eley said, the papers kind of come at the end of a long project. So I think, it's important to firstly define sort of what endpoints you want out of whatever sort of research program that you enter, and then also be very clear about that with your supervisors at the beginning. And good supervisors will be accommodating of that, or they'll tell you that that's it's not for them. So, but I think having an open dialogue with the supervisors can really sort of make or break the program for sure.
Thank you for that. It looks like the questions are starting to slow down, but we did have one more. Robert raised his hand. Robert, did you have another question?
Awesome. Thank you. And sorry for the second question. I just wanted to ask whether you can elaborate on the research requirements for application into the PhD.
That's a little bit vague, because it can be several things. What is probably not very well known in North America is a research honors. So that's something that's very common in the UK and also the Australia. It's a year. It's a research year that you actually have to qualify for it. So the better students are allowed to enroll. I may be a little bit off here. Rashan, I don't know. Did you do an honors year?
No,
Okay.
I didn't actually.
But you'd be familiar with, it's not a mandatory thing, but I'm trying to give you an example about what the graduate school would consider you ready to go into a PhD. And if you get a first class honors, which is a good one, you get a high mark, that would allow you to go straight into a PhD. Now, it may not get you a scholarship. So this is where the competitiveness comes in the system that we have here. But again, it doesn't mean you're not going to get in one. You wouldn't want to go in straight away. Maybe you want to do some more research and then get a couple publications. It is competitive. It's very competitive, not so much again to get into a PhD, but to get a scholarship. And I think we all need to realize that with the way the world is happening at the moment, money is going to be shifting around, and it's probably not going to favor things like scholarship opportunities. But, we've had nearly 100%, and that was only in the very early years of this program, where a few students didn't get scholarships. But for the last sort of 7 or 8 years, every student that we put through has gotten a scholarship. And it's very important that you do. That's why I take it very seriously to make sure that I have a really good feeling that the student is, first committed and also able to get a scholarship, because, you cannot do it without that. And especially an international student cannot self-fund a PhD. You have to get a scholarship, but it is very possible. And, I have to be telling students that, look, get some more experience. If you want to do a PhD, you might have to wait till later, because I don't want you to go through the application process and then be disappointed. So it's not really clear cut. And look, everything's competitive. So that's the way I'd answer that. If you're going to go for something, you want to give it your all, obviously, but it does help to know what they're looking for. And there's some information also on the website. If you kind of scroll through what I've provided on the website, you'll probably find it. And if you're not sure, feel free to send me an email and ask a question.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks for that. So we're running toward the end of the session. Before we finalize everything, I might just see if Professor Eley or Rashan, if you have any final bits of advice that you would like to give to the attendees.
You go for it, Rashan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sort of. Obviously, the sort of points that I raised earlier. I think, as you've seen through during this seminar, there's a great breadth of research that you can get involved with, from sort of highly, I guess, well, not informal to formal research degrees, and there's also plenty of assistants and course staff and students that are a few years ahead of you. That will help you get through the program. I think one of the things that I'd really emphasize is, if you're interested in any of this stuff, then you really have to flag your interest, and then it sort of starts rolling from there. I think if you kind of sit back and are a bit passive, then it probably passes you by. But once you get involved, I mean, my experience has been fantastic, and I've learned a lot about, I guess, clinical medicine, and I think I've learned a lot of sort of clinical skills even through the research program, and the sort of, my supervisors and collaborators have really contributed well to, I think, my sort of development. So I have nothing but good things to say about the program.
I'll just wrap up by saying, you know, research teaches you a lot of skills. One of the things that really teaches you is organization, and you know, really you get to know yourself, because you will have a lot of commitment to fulfill. And you know, a thing that I really want to emphasize: if you're coming into medicine and you wanted to be a doctor for a long time, probably, look, you're in medicine, you're going to be a doctor. That should be your priority. If you can manage to do some extra research on the side, that's great, and take what you can from that. But be committed to what you do, you know, agree to, and finish. It's better to finish one little tiny thing than have something drag on forever and you never finish it. You will be known for that, but that's not a good thing. But if you finish things, then you can move on to something else. So I mean, I'm saying this because a lot of students feel they've got to do research in their medical degree. We don't have to. MD PhD is a very different program, and you know, really, really welcome anyone with an interest in that, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. But not everybody needs to do an MD PhD. It depends on what you want to do with your career. And you don't have to do research particularly. You'll get plenty in the curriculum, but do take that on board when you're looking for research opportunities to think strongly about what do you want to get out of this. And a lot of it is just some good skills about knowing yourself, and like, oh, I don't really think I like research. That's a good outcome for everybody, because you just leave it. That's fine. You'll still get some good skills, but you know, maybe research isn't for you. So, you know, don't put pressure on yourself. Think about what you want and what you can commit to and finish. And happy to talk to anybody or send me an email.
Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone for joining the session today. And especially thank you to Professor Eley and Roshan for your insights. I'm sure they're very valuable. I hope everyone has a great day, and we hope to see you soon here at UQ. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye.
Thanks, Roshan. That was great.
Yeah, no worries. My pleasure. Hopefully it was useful for the attendees.
Yeah, I hope so. There were about well, there were 50 at one time. So Irina, is somebody still on? Can I ask, are we going to be able to get the chat, or if anybody wants to contact us? Or looks like they've gone. Anyway, I'll ask and let you know. I mean, sometimes I saw things in the chat, but I couldn't tell. So I'm happy for them to send them on. But it looks like Irene and Kate have gone. So we might as well wrap it up ourselves.
Oh, okay. No,
Oh.
I'm still here. So we still have some students, I think, still here. So maybe we can log off and then have a quick chat.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
good. That's
Okay.
what I was
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.